I last left off with Whyte's The Organization Man and the obsession in the 1950s with group techniques and approaches in the corporate and bureaucratic workforce. According to Whyte, this obsession was encompassed by the greater belief in the group as superior to the individual. Indeed, the organization man thought that science had proven as much. Consensus, cooperation, and participation. The 1950s organization thus saw these abstractions as worthwhile goals in of themselves, without reference to any ends. Again, the corporate culture was all about the individual conforming to the group or majority, or at least conforming to the social engineer's vision of what the group or majority should be. But in actual workplace practice, what this truly meant was that the organization's leaders would praise the team for any major progress or breakthroughs, even when it was blatantly obvious that such results were based on great individual effort, a practice which will undoubtedly sound familiar to many today. And the organization increasingly clamped down on the individual's ability to make an impact. In sum, as Whyte argues, this focus on group work was nothing but a call to arms by the mediocre against their enemies. Moving on, however, Whyte takes on how the man of his day nevertheless capitulated, embracing this great power of the supposed majority as he joined the organization and its ranks, or at least the man who was about to join its ranks, as Whyte next turns to the college senior and the education system's relationship to the growing corporation and ever-increasing bureaucracy. Jumping straight in, he offers us a sketch of the college senior of the 1950s and his worldview, and forgive the constant change from the present tense to the past tense as I switch from the author's words to my own. Due to the manner in which colleges had been changing their curriculum to suit the corporation, Whyte points out how the senior's step from college to manager in training at the corporation was like nothing but a transfer. Because they are the largest single group, the corporation-bound seniors are the most visible manifestation of their generation's values, more than any generation in memory, and Whyte includes the lawyers, doctors, and scientists on this point. Theirs will be a generation of bureaucrats. They were a politically passive generation of college seniors, Whyte explains. If they do any moving, it will be from dead center. No cause seizes them. No one seems to care one way or another. There is no real revolution in them. Neither were they interested in the larger questions surrounding life and our existence, he adds. Most are only interested in the philosophical only to the extent of finding out what the accepted view is in order that they may accept it and get on to the practical matters. For theological students specifically, Whyte cites his contemporary, Norman Pettinger, then professor of the General Theological Seminary in New York, and how students today want to be told, rather than think things through for themselves, he said. They wanted an authority to do all the work for them. And this testimony certainly contains serious implications to where we are as a nation today, religiously speaking, as we can assume that at least some of these students went on to become pastors or spiritual leaders of some kind. As Pettinger adds, it would be better and healthier if the new respect for authority were more frequently found, in combination with a spirit of inquiry, a ready willingness to think through what is authoritatively declared, and a refusal ever to accept anything simply because some reputable expert makes the statement. Whyte also writes how the college seniors of the 1950s do not want to rebel against the status quo, because he really likes it. And on this point he almost comes to their defense, as it were, noting how they had no reasons to rebel like previous generations did. To the seniors, he writes, "The big questions are all settled. We know the direction," the senior says, "and while many minor details remain to be cleared up, we can be pretty sure of enjoying a wonderful upward rise." And here I would like to briefly reiterate an important argument. This was the 1950s. Some readers or listeners may immediately react to the aforementioned passages as all well and good because of how, at the height of the Vietnam War, college students in the next decade did in fact begin to rebel by protesting and the like. But the reality seems to be that a large portion of those same supposed rebels have since gone on to embrace the ever-increasing bureaucratization and corporatization of the country. In short, this latter group certainly seems to have embraced the same status quo as the passive and unquestioning generation that Whyte describes in his book. Whatever path they may have started on, they have come around to buy into the same system as this former group. And more on that in a moment. And I am pointing this out not just to blame one group or generation over another, but to point out how consistently it seems Americans have been with their buying into the system throughout the years. Moving on, however, Whyte saw the seniors' view of the big questions having already been settled as optimism, but as an optimism peculiarly American. Indeed, how could it be otherwise? In the wake of the Second World War, much of the rest of the world had either been torn to shreds by the devastation of global conflict or had been otherwise impoverished. Only a decade removed from such realities, the college senior's political passivity and his view of the world and its problems as having been solved, although currently viewed in retrospect, was clearly misguided and should have been put in check by the same education systems that were selling themselves over to the corporations. But as Whyte continues, having no quarrel with society, they, college seniors, prefer to table the subject of ends and concentrate instead on means. Not what or why, but how interests them. And any evangelical strain they have, they can sublimate. Once they have equated the common weal, that is to say, the common good, with organization, a task curriculum makes easy, they will let the organization worry about goals. As Whyte adds, from a nameless economics professor, they do not question the system. If I have not made it clear enough, this is the main overarching problem I believe Whyte's work highlights. My hypothesis is that it offers a roadmap, as it were, of how we got to where we are today. And while to Whyte it started with the figure of the college senior of the 1950s, and his leaving the system unchallenged, we can look past Whyte and see how subsequent generations have continued to leave the system unquestioned, or dare I say, have only questioned the system in the ways the powerful explicitly want them to question it. Regardless, it seems incredibly important to understand how the generation of students Whyte describes, especially with their unduly optimistic worldview in hand, allowed the bureaucracy and the large corporation to grow into the unwieldy organizations they have become today. Indeed, as Whyte continues, the college senior of the 1950s wanted to explicitly work for someone else. He even describes him as a collaborator, an odd enough term to use, given the ongoing Cold War of the period. The bottom line is that this senior wanted more than anything to be a part of the big corporation, while previous generations, and Whyte includes himself here, took corporate jobs in the hopes of garnering the skills he needed to be independent. That had become an old dream. Having a business of one's own was a desire held almost exclusively by factory workers, the one group, as a number of sociologists have reported, least able to fulfill it. The college senior would often enough turn down jobs with higher starting salaries at smaller businesses in favor of positions at the larger corporations, even being willing to take as much as about half the same starting salary to do as such. But as Whyte writes, for the most part, seniors do not like to talk about the future in terms of the dollar. On several occasions, I have been politely lectured by someone for so much as bringing the point up. The problem, of course, is that it is easy to shun any discussion of salary at a time when jobs were just about guaranteed. As Whyte explains some pages later, there were more job vacancies than graduates, and the attractive senior will usually have some 8 or 9 offers to choose from. He does not throw that advantage away. While they talk little about money, they talk a great deal about the good life. A nice place out in the suburbs, a wife and 3 children, 1, maybe 2 cars, and a summer place at the lake or out on the Cape, and later, a good college education for the children. It is not, seniors explain, the money that counts. Just 20 years and less removed from the Great Depression, and just 10 years removed from the Second World War, and the college senior was already taking the middle-class life, and upper-middle-class life by today's standards, as completely for granted. But beyond the good life of the future, the college senior also talked in terms of wanting to do something worthwhile, even of wanting to take part in some form of gregarious service to benefit others. However, what he really wanted in practice was to be a part of the administrative or managerial class. Whyte refers to this as the staff bias. While he also talked about wanting to be involved in personnel work, as the actual personnel work of the period was connected more to time management and aptitude testing, rather than managing people directly, he turned instead to public relations. Or, as Whyte describes, in his vision, he sees the universal man of the future, testing the pulse of the workers to see that they are happy, counseling with educators and clergymen for better intergroup communication, spellbinding the mossbacks, that is to say, the old-fashioned people, with advocacy of the common man. As in personnel work, he will be nice to everybody on the company time. When seniors check such ostensibly line occupations as sales, they still exhibit the staff bias, for they don't actually want to sell. What they mean by sales is the kind of work in which they will be technical specialists, helping the customer, or better yet, masterminding the work of those who do the helping. They want to be sales engineers, distribution specialists, merchandising experts, the men who back up the men in the field. As Whyte marks elsewhere, they see the collective as the best vehicle for service. As manager or administrator at a large corporation, starting in such fields as sales, public relations, or finance, the college senior really did want to help, Whyte argues, adding, however, that this is a self-ennobling apologia for seeking the comfortable life. But Whyte himself shows his own support for the same increasingly bureaucratic system he, at least on occasion, criticizes, with his suggestion that, if college seniors were thoroughly consistent, they might pursue government or public service work instead. Nevertheless, Whyte asks the quintessential question of how the college senior got this way. His answer, because his elders taught him to be that way. And it is here that Whyte takes on the college curriculum and how colleges have pulled farther and farther away from offering students well-rounded education in favor of offering more specialized courses in business and commerce in order to suit the needs of the corporation. But more on that next time. I hope to see you there.